Hello, 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 and welcome to this edition of A Quick Pint. There is a video on Reddit of a Ukrainian psychologist who has asserted that 70% of his clients are men who took their wives to the safety of Western Europe at the beginning of the war and have returned to Ukraine and have now found that their wives have dumped them, have abandoned them for Western men.
Насчет женщин, которые выехали за границу с началом войны в Украине, хочу немножко рассказать. Смотрите, у меня за последние полгода примерно 1000 консультаций. И 70% моих клиентов это как раз мужчины, которые, как нормальные, порядочные, достойные мужчины, с началом войны вывезли своих жен с детьми, девушек за границу, в безопасное место. Сами либо взяли автомат, пошли боронити країну, либо остались в Украине. Так вот, 7 женщин из 10 побросали мужей, парней, позаводили себе поляков, испанцев, немцев, поразваливали отношения. И я не знаю, это трагедия нашего времени. Что с этим миром, что с женщинами в нашем мире творится.
70% of his clients are psychologically traumatized Ukrainian men who have found themselves in that position. Now, obviously, this is most upsetting and awful for those men, but naturally, it is not surprising at all from an evolutionary psychological perspective. At all. Why not? Well, let's look at the evolution of men and women. Men, of course, have nothing to lose from the sexual encounter. They can basically have sex with as many women as they can get away with, and just hope that some of the offspring survive and invest nothing. With women, it's different. Women have something to lose from the sexual encounter. Women can become pregnant, and therefore women are far more picky. In evolutionary terms, what they need is a man who is going to who has good genes, and what they need is a man who is going to look after them and look after the offspring, i.e. invest in them. And that will mean that both they and the offspring will survive. So they will sexually select for men who have the inclination and ability to invest in them. What does that mean? It means they sexually select for status, because a man of high status is, one, likely to have the resources to invest in them and their offspring. He is, two, in so much as status is associated with being pro-social and traits like that and getting on with people, he is likely to have the inclination to invest in them and their offspring. And three, it could be argued that the fact that he has high status is a testimony to his intelligence, it's a testimony to his pro-social nature, his high conscientiousness, his high agreeableness, these sorts of things. And these tend to be selected for concomitantly in our history, because they get you status, and it's men with higher status that end up with more surviving offspring because the women sexually select for them. They tend to go together with general genetic health. So also by selecting for status, there is a degree to which women are selecting for genetic health. The offspring is more likely to carry these traits itself. The offspring is more likely to survive and perpetuate itself. So women marry up. Women marry hypergamously. And so obviously, if they're going to go from the Ukraine, which is a poor country, to Western Europe, which is wealthier, they're going to find men who are wealthier, who have more resources, who have higher status than their husbands, and consequently, they are going to sexually select for those men, particularly because, as well, the bond with their husband is going to be broken to some extent by being away from him. So this is completely predictable on those grounds. The second reason it's predictable is there was a paper which myself and my Swedish colleague Guy Madison did a few years ago. Women also sexually select for status in terms of nationality itself. So one's nationality is an element of one's status. There are high and low status nationalities. There are nations that are richer than other nations, and the individuals from those nations, the men from those nations, will be sexually attractive to women partly because they are from those nations. This has actually been called by my colleague AJ Figueredo Dutton's rule. Because it was myself that has demonstrated this so many times. We showed it with Finnish data. We got all of the multicultural marriages, all of the marriages between Finns and foreigners that took place in Finland in the year 2013. We coded each of the nationalities basically for how rich they were. And what we showed was that Finnish men are like, when they marry foreigners, will marry foreigners from countries that are poorer than Finland. Whereas Finnish women, when they marry foreigners, will marry foreigners from countries that are richer than Finland. So the international marriage system between countries completely reflects the female desire for hypergamy in terms of status. It completely reflects the female desire to marry for status. Females marry for status in the sense that the man will tend to be of slightly higher socioeconomic status than the woman. He will tend on average to earn more. He will tend on average to be more educated. He will tend on average to be from a slightly richer or more educated or slightly higher status background. But also they will do this in terms of nationality. They will literally sexually select for higher status nationalities, because perhaps it is assumed in evolutionary terms that an individual from a high status nation will somehow embody, somehow possess some of the elements, some of the psychological genetic aspects that have rendered his nation of higher status than her nation, and that will be passed on to the offspring, and the offspring would be more likely to survive in harsh Darwinian selection terms, which is what we're we're evolved to want to be dealing with. And also, of course, it just means greater resources. Such a person from a rich nation is likely to have, because he's from that nation, greater access to resources than somebody from a poor nation, and so therefore it makes more sense for that man to be selected for by the woman. This is known as Dutton's rule. So I'm afraid it's awful. I'm sure it's absolutely awful for these poor Ukrainian fellows, but for a Ukrainian woman to be taken by her Ukrainian husband to England and find herself very, very sexually attracted to English men, or if it's France, French men, or if it's whatever country, Western European men, is extremely predictable, and it's what we would expect from an evolutionary psychological perspective.